Hamilton from Audible Elegance of Cincinnati, Ohio. Welcome back, my viewers. And we do work on Facebook, Instagram, and X. We also have a monthly blog. I've got to write a new one for that. Our website is audibleelegance.com. And today I thought I would talk a bit about basic troubleshooting of systems. And I'll have to break this down into two parts. The first part being what I would call older equipment, basic systems, particularly stereo. And so let's get started. The nature of problems in systems, basic stereo systems, often revolves around one channel not performing, as opposed to both being out. And when trying to troubleshoot a system, there's a couple easy ways of doing it. And what you got to do is you got to find out what's at fault. And you can begin at the speaker end or you can begin at the source ends. I personally prefer starting at the source ends. So for example, let's say you have a turntable or a CD player in the system and you only have one channel. One of the easy things to do is to merely take the interconnect connecting those products or the tone arm leads and simply flipping them right and left channel. If the problem follows the exchange positions of right and left, then you know it's in the transmitting product. If it does not, then you have absolved, for the moment, that particular item, and you start moving down the chain. Now, if you have, let's say, two different items connected to the system, and you have one channel out on one and you go to try another one and it's working anyway, you don't even need to flip cables. You already have your target, which is either the transmitting product or the input that it's in. The sequence from there, let's say you have a preamp and amplifier, then again flip the right and left and see whether the problem follows or not. And that way you begin to isolate it down. Now, when we're talking about preamplifiers, particularly as we get into older ones with mechanical switches, one of the most common faults that I've encountered over the years is a problem with the tape monitor switches. As you know, oftentimes when you hit a tape monitor switch, the system goes silent, or it can. And so the signal is actually passing through that tape monitor switch. So that may require you to press or turn it, depending upon how it's styled, numerous times to temporarily try to clear it. And if the channel comes back, voila, there you are. You can go on further down the chain from that point and literally swap the speaker leads. It's easiest to do it at the amplifier end rather than at the speaker end, because Lord knows how far apart they are, and see whether the problem follows there or not. Again, that's trying to isolate it down what it is. If you flip the speaker leads and the problem follows, then you basically have a suspicious amplifier section. Still could be the speakers, but not likely, because you've had both speakers play just one channel only. So then you go back as it's hooked up and just flip it around with the sources, one source or two sources, to see whether it follows or not. Typically it won't, and then you've isolated it down to what your fault is. When you're talking amplifiers and basically amplifiers really, all of the amplifiers have a external fuse that covers a major default of the amplifier. In other words, they don't want it bursting into flames, so that fuse would pop. However, that fuse would take out both channels. The set wouldn't even turn on. So what a lot of people don't realize is that there are also inside of the amplifiers what are known as rail fuses. And you can visually check many of them, if you know, in particularly the older designs, because they typically used glass fuses. And so you can literally see where you can see the wire running through the one fuse, and the other one maybe look like it's all silver coated. That fuse has been blown. Now, if you discover that, and of course you want the set turned off and preferably unplugged when you're doing that inspection, the only thing you should do is to replace it with the exact value of the fuse or smaller. Never increase the value of the fuse. That's just risking even further damage or potentially catastrophic failures. That original fuse blow for a good reason. Give me a moment. I'll be right back. I want to grab a tool that you may want to have. And what you're going to be wanting to have is a multimeter that has where it makes a sound. So I'm turning this one on, and there's the sound, and that's showing continuity. In order to check fuses, it's best to remove them from the clips and then apply probes at each end of the fuse. If you get a sound, that means the fuse is running continuity. If it doesn't, that means the fuse is open. Now, in more modern equipment, the Europeans required a different type of fuse to be used, and they're known as ceramic fuses. And as the word says, they are ceramic, they're not glass. And the reason for it was the safety, because glass fuses under certain circumstances could in fact fracture and essentially explode. I'd personally never seen it, but obviously it must have happened. So the use of ceramics means that it contains whatever happens in that flash inside the fuse. With those, you're definitely going to have to use a multimeter. Again, you're going to have to remove the fuse from the circuit to test it. And I say that because sometimes you'll get, if you leave it in the circuit, you'll actually get a sense of continuity, but it has nothing to do with the fuse. I've only had one instance in 40 years where the fuse seemingly tested good, but in fact was at fault. It took a technician to really check it over and try to figure out what was going on, because he couldn't figure it out either initially. So that can happen, but that's extraordinarily rare. So that's looking at the fuses inside the amplifier. If that is in fact the culprit, again, use the same values. So if it calls for a quick blow fuse at 3 amp, you use a 3 amp or lesser value, 2 3/4, 2, whatever. Although the lower values may fry on the surge and turn-ons. You do not want to replace a fast blow fuse with a slow blow fuse. Slow blow fuses are designed more to take the initial surge and hold in there, and then eventually, if they have to, they'll release and go. Conversely, if you have a slow blow fuse in the circuit, a lot of times it'll either say slow blow on the board or it'll say slow blow on the fuse. Physically, in a glass one, you can actually see what looks to be like a spring attached to it. And with a slow blow fuse, when they blow, the spring pulls back, and again, you have your gap. It's pretty rare to have it actually flash and leave metal all around the glass. So you'll have some amplifiers that when they initially turn on, they draw a fair amount of current, and that's where the slow blow fuses come in. It's all designed around those parameters. So that's the fundamentals of trying to look at a basic stereo system. We can now get into some of the more modern ones, and Some of the more modern ones where they are digitally controlled, I hate to say it, but one of the first things you need to do is unplug it and let it set. I like to say, for 5 or 10 minutes. You may put the power switch on to try to drain anything out of it that may be in it, but some of the modern products can actually lock up due to surges or any number of things, causing a channel to drop out or an entire input not to work at all. So we've experienced that with some of the products recently. This can happen with home theater receivers as well, because a lot of those are microprocessors anymore. So that's the basic, trying to figure out where the sound is and where it is. And when you get into home theater receivers, that gets a bit trickier, because oftentimes you're dealing with one of multiple channels out, but your normal only source for multi-channel is through the HDMI cable from, let's say, a Blu-ray player. So in that case, you may need to come up with or borrow another player to see whether it's in the player itself, which is really rare, or in the receiver. Again, the receivers may get confused, so powering it down and unplugging is the start. Bring it back up, and then bring up the menu on the video screen to make sure that all of the settings are correct, that they haven't changed. I've seen where surges have caused what was originally set as a channel balance to get essentially frappated into everything. You can also have a case, pretty rare, if you lose it completely, where you have assigned that input a certain value that is not part of the default, to actually go back during a surge or something and go to the default. In other words, no longer recognizing what's plugged into it because it's looking for something else. So those sort of things can happen, and that's kind of like the basic starting point for looking at things. Now, assuming you find a defective product or item, be aware that sometimes it is mechanical in nature. So when you put it in the car and you take it to a shop and they get it and they test it, everything is fine. It's what I refer to as the magic car ride. And of course, when you drive it back home, there again, the fault is. That can happen. But the best thing to do is to try to isolate where the problem is first. So that's kind of the basics of looking at where problems can be and where they can start. You're more than welcome to ask questions, through the comments. You may have particular cases that I can get into the particulars on, and we can go from there. So thank you very much for watching. Please do subscribe to the channel. Bye.